2:44 a.m., October 12, 1944. Outside a fortified chateau near Aachen, Germany, a bone-chilling mist clings to the valley floor, turning the stone walls of the estate into a ghostly monolith. Inside the reinforced cellar, Oberleutnant Klaus Weber swirls a splash of schnapps in a crystal glass. He feels untouchable. He is shielded by 3 feet of masonry and a perimeter of 11 elite sentries, veterans of the Eastern Front, who've been told that no Allied scout can breathe near these walls without being detected. To Weber, the Americans are a loud industrial machine, clumsy, over-reliant on artillery, and terrified of the dark. In the next 12 minutes, every man under his command will be dead. While Weber sips his drink, Corporal Silas Vance is a shadow within a shadow. He is motionless, prone in a frozen drainage pipe 30 yards from the first picket line. The smell of stagnant metallic water and rotted October vegetation is thick in his lungs. He isn't clutching a standard issue K-bar or a heavy M1 bayonet. Instead, his fingers are locked around a pair of heavy-duty, high-leverage bypass shears, their blades ground down to a surgical, terrifying point. This act of lethal improvisation was explicitly forbidden by High Command, a violation of every field manual ever printed at West Point. But on this night, the manual was just paper. Silas was holding the steel. Before the draft board called his name, Silas Vance didn't know a thing about theatrical combat or the glory of the infantry. He was a master pruner from the apple orchards of Washington State. He spent 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, thinking in angles. He understood the exact leverage required to snap a 2-inch thick branch with a single, silent squeeze. He knew the difference between a crushing cut and a cleaving cut. Most importantly, he knew how to move through dense brush without snapping a single twig, a skill earned from years of navigating the quiet, dew-heavy rows of the Yakima Valley. When Silas enlisted in '42, his instructors at Fort Benning were baffled. During hand-to-hand drills, he didn't grip his combat knife with the proper tactical seat. He held his tools with a strange mechanical efficiency, focusing on points of least resistance rather than raw force. The drill sergeants called his technique unorthodox and sloppy. They saw a quiet farmhand who couldn't adapt to the army way. They failed to realize he had already mastered the anatomy of resistance long before he ever saw a uniform. The tactical problem at the Aachen Chateau was a nightmare of German engineering. The perimeter was a spiderweb of high-tension tripwires connected to brass bells and bouncing Betty mines. Standard Army M1938 wire cutters were heavy, blunt, and imprecise. When they snapped a high-tension wire, the sudden release of energy caused a twang that echoed like a guitar string through the silent valley. Private Leo Miller, 19, from Sandusky, Ohio. He was a boy who wanted to open a bakery with his father after the war. He was found with a Mauser round in his temple because his issued cutters clattered against a stone wall. Sergeant Frank Pops Rossi, 34, from Newark. He carried a weathered photo of his twin daughters in his helmet liner. He died when his bayonet snagged on a German wool tunic, giving the sentry just enough time to scream a warning. Private Elias Thorne, 20, from the Maine woods. He was killed when a tripwire vibration alerted a sniper 400 yards out. Captain Sterling watched the body bags being zipped from a safe distance. His uniform was pressed. His map case was pristine. "We follow the manual, men," he barked, his voice echoing the rigid doctrine of the academy. "Stealth is a byproduct of discipline, not equipment. If the wire cutters are too loud, you aren't cutting them fast enough." Silas Vance watched the failures from the shadows. He saw what the West Point strategists missed. The German wire wasn't just a barrier, it was a system of physics. A standard anvil cut was a failure. It compressed the metal before breaking it, creating a sound signature. But a bypass cut, where 2 curved blades pass each other at a precise, sliding angle, would shear the steel without the vibration. He went to a local abandoned farmstead and scavenged what he needed. A pair of rusted high-leverage garden shears. He spent the night in a muddy foxhole with a whetstone and a file. He ground the jaw of the shears into a needle-sharp hook and wrapped the handles in greasy friction tape to dampen any metallic click. He was calculating the mechanical advantage, the physics of the fulcrum that would allow him to kill with less effort than it took to pull a trigger. He presented the modification to Captain Sterling. The captain's face turned a deep, furious red. "That is civilian junk, Corporal. You will use the issued M1938 cutters, or I will have you court-martialed for sabotaging your kit. We are a professional army, not a gardening club." Silas didn't argue. He waited until the captain went to sleep.
At 2 a.m.,
Silas went rogue. He slipped into the darkness alone, with zero support and a tool meant for apple trees. The air was frigid, crystallizing the breath in his lungs. Silas could smell the wet wool of his own uniform and the faint acrid scent of ersatz tobacco from the sentries. Mud sucked at his boots. He moved with the agonizing slowness of a man who knew that a single heartbeat of sound meant an MG-42 burst. He reached the first wire, 14 inches off the frozen ground. 32 degrees of tension. He didn't just cut. He placed the hook of the shears at a 45-degree downward angle, muffling the blades with a piece of oily rag. Apply 4 pounds of pressure. Squeeze. Snap. Silence. The wire went limp without a sound. He reached the first sentry, Gefrader Hans Mueller. Silas didn't use a knife. He used the shears, re-engineered for a different kind of pruning, a mechanical, high-leverage bite to the carotid artery. It was cold. It was mechanical. Target 2, slumped. Target 5, silenced. Target 11, neutralized. Each time, the mechanics were the same, short, punchy movements, the physics of the orchard applied to the theater of war. He exhaled halfway, held, squeezed. He reached the cellar door where Weber sat. The perimeter was gone. The invincible guards were just fallen branches, pruned from the tree of the Reich. By 3 a.m., an entire American company walked through the front gates of the chateau without firing a single shot. 11 German guards were found at their posts, appearing almost as if they had fallen asleep, if not for the surgical, terrifying precision of their wounds. The Vance modification was never mentioned in the official after-action reports. Captain Sterling took the credit for a brilliant stealth infiltration and was later promoted to major. Silas Vance, meanwhile, received a formal reprimand for losing his issued wire cutters during the engagement. Years later, the OSS and eventually the Green Berets would quietly study the mechanics of bypass leverage for their own clandestine tools. The 1949 Tactical Revision Manual would include improvised silent entry techniques that looked remarkably like a gardener's logic, but Silas's name was never in the footnotes. When the war ended in 1946, Silas didn't stay for the parades or the handshakes. He went back to the Washington orchards. He never spoke about Aachen. He never told his neighbors why he could prune a tree faster and more quietly than any man in the county. He had cows to milk. He had apples to grow. If you found this story compelling, please like this video. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories.